This is Tegan Podliska Module 16, EDL 854. It's our case study, Missing Booster Club Funds. Category 1, Problem Identification and Analysis. What do I know? I know that it's a low socioeconomic school district with strong parental involvement. Volunteers collect gate proceeds and sell concessions. They have 2 adults at each of those stations. Principal Stevens is the only administrator, and he relies heavily on the parents. Mrs. Bowman's funding request was denied. Her daughter qualified for a national cheerleading competition, so she went to Mr. Stevens and asked for some potential funding for that, and he denied it. There was a basketball game, and she was working the ticket table. 10 tickets were ruined, according to her, at the gate, and so those funds were unaccounted for. Principal Stevens had a conversation with one of the parents who claimed they had paid with a $50 bill, and at the end of the day, in the money bag, the $50 bill was unaccounted for. What do I need to know? Is there surveillance footage available? Did the amount of tickets sold meet a capacity crowd? They said it was a capacity crowd, so if you know how many people are in that crowd typically, then you can kind of analyze your funding. Was it adequate or equal to what it normally is when you have a capacity crowd? Who was working with Mrs. Bowman? Did they notice anything? Did they see a $50 bill or anything like that? Are we certain Mr. Dumas used a $50 bill? Did someone make change for the $50 bill? Did Mrs. Bowman or the other worker potentially, they had 5 tens, and so they traded it in for a 50? Where are the ruined tickets? Did they throw them away? Did they keep them? What is the protocol on that? And identify the problem. Basically, it's where is the $50 bill? Category 2, Proposed Plan of Action with Strategies. First, you want to review the surveillance footage. Mr. Stevens would obtain that and review it himself and see if Mr. Dumas paid with the $50 bill, what happened to it. When they got to the point where those 10 tickets were missing, did that person, pull out those 10 tickets and throw them away? Where did those go? Second, compare gates from previous capacity crowds. Verify that with the bookkeeper. See if we had 90 people there, and we always have 90 people there, and the funding was there for 90 people, then did the money go missing, or what happened to the $50 bill is the real question. Third, search the trash near the ticket distribution for missing tickets. Mr. Stevens would search that, possibly with janitorial help. Fourth, verify with Mr. Dumas the use of a $50 bill. So contact him, verify that he used it. Sometimes people talk and they say, I want to sound like I have some money, so I paid with a $100 bill. So see if that really happened or if he was just exaggerating a little bit. So Mr. Stevens would contact him. Fifth, speak with the other adult volunteer. So contact them. Like I said, discuss if a $50 bill was used, if they saw it, if they noticed when the 10 tickets were thrown away or anything like that. Sixth, meet with Mrs. Bowman, and Mr. Stevens would set up that meeting. Obviously, as you go through those first 5 steps, if you confirm that there isn't an issue, then that may or may not need to happen in the future. You wouldn't need to meet with Mrs. Bowman if you figured it out in the first 5 steps. Unless you found guilt in those first 5 steps. In that case, you would still need to meet with Mrs. Bowman to discuss. Category 3, resolve the issues based on promoting the success of all students. Suspending involvement of Mrs. Bowman in PTA activities until the issue is resolved. Obviously, if there is an issue, then you would want that to not occur. If someone's under investigation, then you're not going to want them to work the next 6 events until that is resolved. If guilty, you're going to want to examine your PTA policy and your board policy. Is that going to require suspension, termination, reduced participation? So are they going to be allowed to partake in PTA activities but not take money or deal with money or anything like that? So reduce their involvement but possibly keep them involved. And then obviously require repayment if guilty. Create policies for ticket taking and concession selling with clear outlines and educate your volunteers on these policies. You want to develop a process. You want to talk about the issues and make sure your process addresses all those issues and then address those consequences. And you really want to educate those people on what the policies are going to be, what the consequences are going to be, so they know exactly what they're supposed to do. When they have 10 tickets that are ruined, are they supposed to keep those tickets aside, or are they supposed to just tell you that those existed and throw them away? Obviously, if you have those policies addressed and that process addressed, then you aren't going to run into these problems in the future. And once again, you need to educate people on that. You can't just be like, okay, I wrote it on a piece of paper, they're supposed to read it. So actually have a meeting with your volunteers and address what you're supposed to do. Work toward adding administrative supports, assistant principal, athletic director, and then other supports. I know we're going to add some SAM positions, which are basically positions to help our administration. We're moving down to one principal at our middle school and our high school levels, and we don't have any supports outside of that, so we're going to add some supports for them so they can spend some more time in the classroom. Allow for more than one administrator at events, so people in those advisory administration roles to help out. Category 4, debrief the problem. What was I thinking? Must be handled professionally, and to me, it's innocent until proven guilty. I'm not going to assume anybody's at fault. You go to the assumption that they're at fault because maybe they're upset about that meeting. You don't want to do that. Potential consequences, so you want to think about those right away. If found guilty, what's going to happen? What are our policies? Do we have things in place? Did we educate this person? Can we hold them accountable for something they didn't know happened or could happen? So what can be done in the future? How can we be proactive about this in the future and eliminate this problem? Feeling Mrs. Bowman had a potential motive. So you feel that a little bit. Regardless of if you want to assume innocence or not, you're still going to have that feeling. More measures should be in place to prevent theft. I think they did a really good job with their 2 volunteers, their ticketed system. Need to educate the volunteers. And angry, a $50 bill is missing. And, when that happens, you immediately start thinking, well, if this happened now, could it have happened before? Have we had any issues with tickets before? And did I only realize it this time because someone specifically told me that they paid with a $50 bill? I'm valuing honesty from my workers and the people surrounding me. Also, the positive procedures in place. Because of the procedures in place, he was able to recognize that there was a problem. If they didn't have a ticketed system and he didn't have that conversation, then he never would have known it was happening. So, he had 2 people there. He had a ticketed system, and there had to be a conversation about where those tickets went before he investigated the issue. So I'm feeling value in the procedures that are in place. Continued unresolved issues. What are the issues that are still unresolved or open to further investigation? Where's the $50 bill? It's the big question. Why did this occur? So why did this occur? Why was she angry? Why was there motive? Because there was a potential funding for a trip that we weren't able to help out with. How could we resolve that? How could we kind of find some potential funding? Put her in touch with some people that may be able to help her out even though the PTA couldn't. What will be the repercussions? Do we have policies in place, or are we just going to make them up and then add them to the book later? That's not always the fairest thing to do, but you can't think of every situation that could occur. How can we eliminate the possibility of this happening again? Once again, policies in place, educating your volunteers, things of that nature. Administrative support is still an unresolved issue that needs to increase. It's a lot of burden and a lot of problems or potential problems for one person to try to deal with. Category 5, reflection on Standard 8 by providing evidence that you, as the leader, promote the academic success and personal well-being of every student by ensuring effective and efficient management of the school or district to promote student social and academic learning. Component 1, how do you as the school leader promote effective and efficient management of the school or district? Utilize parent volunteers. So that is an effective and efficient practice. He's there by himself. He can't take tickets and work the concession stand and monitor the gym and do everything by himself. So he is going to have to utilize volunteers, and the PTA is a good group to go to find those volunteers. He does have 2 adults taking tickets and working in the concessions. No single-man crews where embezzlement or potential financial mismanagement could occur. Professionalism when dealing with Mrs. Bowman. He's very professional in his meeting and discusses why the funding can't occur and can't come from the PTA. Counted money directly after the event in front of a security guard. So first off, he has a security guard there. Second off, he counts the money directly in front of them and deposits it that night. So that's very effective and efficient management from him. Knows discrepancy due to ticket numbering. So he has a policy in place to prohibit things like this from happening, and he knows it occurred because of the policy he has in place. Component 2, how do you as the school leader promote the social learning of every student? Has a very positive rapport with parents. He's walking around talking to people. The only reason he knows the issue occurs is because he speaks with a parent who, he can have a conversation with, and Mr. Dumas tells him he paid with a $50 bill. He utilizes parents and students teaching financial skills, so he has 2 parents working at all the places. You're assuming there's some student volunteers within there. Reviewed the budget and put student body ahead of the single student. So he looked at the budget and said, there's just no way that we can pay for this trip. It's unfair to the rest of the students. That's where the PTA money is raised for. You can't just say, okay, we're raising money for the PTA and then we're going to spend $1,000 on one student. You need to, when you have a fundraiser and things like that, you tell people what it's going to be for. So if you had a fundraiser for Lucy and said, hey, we're going to raise money for this student to attend the National Cheerleading Convention, then that would be a different story because those people were donating that money knowing that it was going to go to Lucy. He was very supportive of her. He provided justification to Mrs. Bowman. He provided an example saying, how would you feel if we took all the money so that someone could go to an academic camp during the summer? I know that's a little bit different situation based on qualifications and things like that, but I'm sure there's academic camps out there which one could qualify for, and they could spend $1,000 on that. And, the money wouldn't go very far if everybody who qualified for anything was given $1,000. Component 3, how do you as the school leader promote student academic learning? Present at after-school activities, that's one of the biggest things I tell to prospective teachers when they come in my classroom. What kinds of things can we do to be a better teacher? And the biggest thing for me is to attend events. You build relationships with students, you have a rapport with them, and it's the biggest thing for classroom management. It promotes student academic learning. Interaction with parents and students at the events. I've had administrators before who'd gladly sit in the crowd and not do much of anything or interact with anybody outside of their family. It's not very professional. It certainly didn't promote student academic learning. So he was very positive in his interactions with parents and students. Also, he's professional in all of his interactions. He's professional when he meets with her. He's professional when he meets with Mr. Dumas. And he is very professional in all of the policies and things he has in place. Thanks for watching.